Well, but you saying that...
Wait a minute. Wait a minute. And that decolonization process was conducted by the United Nations. And for the United Nations, effective the 1st of October 1961, Southern Cameroons had been decolonized, had achieved independence by joining the Republic of Cameroon. There was no room for turning back on that. And that's why I keep telling my compatriots that, yeah, much as we have every reason to feel aggrieved that we're not allowed to stand on our own, our real grievance is that the basis on which we agreed to join these people, namely that we were going to form a federation of two equal states, was breached. So that's our case.
So what are you left with? Remember, the first question was, do you support or are you in opposition to the method of independence or independence itself? You said both. Well, you acknowledge that both we have reasons, Anglophone Cameroonians have reasons to feel aggrieved. So what is the recourse?
Once again, let me repeat.
What's the recourse?
Once again, let me repeat. Anglophone Cameroonians have reason to feel aggrieved with respect to the events prior to 1st of October 1961. Our grievance is that we should have been allowed to achieve independence on our own. You understand?
Correct.
So that's a grievance. But that grievance is overtaken by the fact that the United Nations, although what it did from our perspective was unjust, immoral, and all of that, it was not illegal because it fell in line with General Assembly Resolution 1541. Okay? Now, post 1st October 1961, we have a grievance. And our grievance is that the basis on which we agreed to join La République has been breached. It's not as if we joined La République without anybody telling us what was going to happen when we joined. As I said, it was the object of a campaign literature and campaign rallies educating our people. Okay? So our people, we are, as at today, entitled to say that the basis on which we joined, namely that we're going to constitute a federation, was breached in 1972. We have been complaining ever since then. All very successive generations. So it's not as if we went to sleep. No. We've been constrained by the reality of international relations, but our people from the very beginning, whether acting individually through the pen and voices of the likes of Bernard Fonlong, or acting collectively like we try to do through the Anglophone General Conferences and subsequently the SCNC, or even what is happening now, we have a record of protest against what happens to us. Okay? So, so to wrap up on this one, my position is that with respect to the decolonization grievance, there's not much we can do about that. So anybody who is telling you they can get the UN to reopen our decolonization dossier as if the UK will come back as administrative authority and all of that, I consider that to be an illusion. It wouldn't happen. By contrast, we would be entitled to push the case, to make the case even today, that there was a breach of the Constitution of 1961 in 1972, and that we're entitled to repair that breach.
Well, but you have been, all of you Anglophone Cameroonian legal scholars have made their arguments, written petitions, protested, people have gone on the street, and what they meet is military confrontation.
Yeah.
Do you blame people who, when they feel that they have nowhere else to go, do you blame them for taking up arms?
I don't blame anyone for taking up arms, and that's why, Divine, if you who are following these matters, including monitoring people on social media and all of that, I would like you to pull out one single example, one where, whether in writing or in speech, I have condemned those whom I call separatists. Yes, I call them separatists. I'm not a separatist. I call them separatists. But whether I have condemned them for taking up arms, no. I don't condemn them for taking up arms because I can understand the frustration that we ourselves have felt by trying to use what we termed the force of argument. We said we prefer the force of argument to the argument of force. That was our mantra in the SCNC, at least in my time. Okay? But it's true that looking back, one can say that the force of argument was not given that much of a chance because of the attitude of Yaoundé. And therefore, if people come wanting to use the what do you call it, the argument of force, I have never condemned them. However, I do say that, number one, as you yourself indicated in your intro, you said war has dire consequences. War has dire consequences. And I spent the better part of my career at the United Nations, which spanned nearly 25 years, working in war-torn countries. So I know what the consequences of war are. And therefore, I have, with my knowledge of what the possible consequences of war, and being determined to spare our population of such consequences, I have argued in favor of us taking a negotiated approach to dealing with the issue of our domination, our marginalization, our assimilation, our takeover in violation of Article 47.
Question, Dr. Moons.
That's where the difference. That's where the difference is, and that's taking into account many things. Unfortunately, there is so much what should I say? Lack of courtesy. On the other side, they will throw insult at you instead of dispassionately allowing us to engage a debate, even amongst ourselves, so that perhaps somebody who is misinformed, who is advocating a particular approach, thinking that it can work, whereas in fact there are all these other obstacles, can listen to pointing out to someone that they have obstacles on their way. May not necessarily mean that you stop them their journey, but they should embark on their journey knowing that they will meet obstacles on the way.
Question, Dr. Munzo. You constantly, and you've said it again and again on this show, that independence is an illusion. Thinking that you can achieve is an illusion. Why isn't it realistic? And here is the argument made. Eritrea got theirs from Ethiopia, Namibia from South Africa, South Sudan from mainland Sudan, and so on, as well as former republics of ex-Soviet Union restored their independence. Why do you think that Southern Cameroonians, their own quest for independence is unrealistic or unachievable?
Well, almost all those examples that you've cited, almost all those examples of territories that broke away from countries to which they once belonged, were attached or whatever, and won their independence. Practically all of those are examples of ethnic nations. Ethnic nations. In other words, whether you take Eritrea, whether you take the South Sudan you're calling, with its conglomeration of ethnic nations and so on. Now, those were ethnic nations, and it is, if you like, they're joining, their integration into whatever territory they're trying to extricate themselves from was not a contraption of the international community. Some of them joined those territories on the understanding that they were entitled to retract if they needed to. some had trial periods over which they could decide whether to stay in the union or not. So the circumstances vary from one territory to another. So it's not enough just to throw out examples and say it happened here, therefore it can happen for us. No. What makes us difficult, as I've been struggling to say all through this program, is that we are a colonial contraption, and it is the colonialists who brought us together. It is the colonialists who marked each step of the way. Paradoxically, if there is any decision with respect to the composition of a country called Cameroon, paradoxically, if there is one decision which was taken by Cameroonians as opposed to colonialists elsewhere, it is the decision, the choice of our people on the 11th of February to achieve independence by joining the Republic. Everything else was thrown on us by colonialists.
Dr. Munzo, you were very
and therefore,
active.
excuse me.
Yes.
So what I'm saying there is that with that as a background, negotiated independence is not it's not realistic at this time. Negotiated independence with who? And that's why as early as July 2017, when this thing started, at a conference in Atlanta, I said to the audience, which included the likes of my friend, Professor Carlson Anyangwe, the likes of Barrister Harmony Bobga, who, as you know, are quote-unquote separatists, that let's not fool ourselves. We're not going to get independence by diplomacy. So if we insist that it has to be independence, we should know that it can only come by war. Okay? And since one has a moral choice between independence by war and returning to the 1961 arrangements by negotiation. Those are two options. And
Dr.
Munzo,
you cited another legal luminary, Dr. Carlson Anyangwe. What divides both of you? You are very knowledgeable. I mean, you are legal scholars. If I'm not mistaken, what divides your position from his position? Who is wrong and who is right?
No, I don't think at the end of the day, my dear brother Divine, it's a matter of who's wrong, who's right. At the end of the day, it's a matter of you can take positions, some of which are just ideological. You can take positions that are sentimental. You can take positions. I don't work on the basis of I am right, he is wrong. I don't know whether he would work on the basis that he is right, I am wrong. But I don't work on the basis that I am right and anybody is wrong. I put forth my arguments, and if you plead General Assembly Resolution 1541, I try to show you why I think it's not applicable. If you plead UN Charter Article 104, which I've heard them spit around, I tell you why I think it is not feasible, and I expect you in rejoinder to tell me why you think it is. We can go like that, but it doesn't have to. It breaks down only where instead of doing that, you throw argument out the window and you concentrate on abusing and insulting someone. That doesn't help us in any way.
Dr. Munzo,
I can only say that Prof. Anyangwe, so Carlson, given that we started at the same position at some point, has obviously at some point came to accept that the attitude of Yaoundé was not helping, was not leaving people any choice, and that therefore we had indeed come to what we call at some point the zero option. So he's entitled, in terms of the evaluation, the assessment of us having arrived at that point, he's entitled to his opinion, and I'm entitled to mine.
I'm going to ask you one question, and then I'm going to open the lines for people to call 240-603-7367. 240-603-7367. 7367. Everyone take note. I'm going to ask one question and then open the line. But before I do that, please take note. This broadcast is aired on our brand new website, www.chatnightafrica.net, www.chatnightafrica.net. It's also being aired now live on YouTube for those who are not on Facebook. The question I have, Dr. Monzo, before I open the phone line to the public, is you took part in the All Anglophone Conference, ASC1 and ASC2. Am I correct?
Correct, of course. I not only took part, I co-convened.
Very good.
Yes.
Dr. Anyangwe took part. Am I right?
Of course. We, as I said, we co-convened.
Now, what was it in one line? What was it meant to accomplish, sir?
What?
The All Anglophone Conferences.
Oh, first, it was meant to awaken collective consciousness of Southern Cameroonians about our plight in the union with the Republic of Cameroon. So especially, don't forget, again, I like to put things in context. Don't forget that we convened the All Anglophone Conference the first time in Buea in the context of an ongoing constitutional reform exercise, which had been initiated by President Biya. Okay? And we said we must seize the opportunity of this constitutional reform process to put the Anglophone problem on the table.
Were your ideas incorporated in the new constitution?
No, they were not, because our proposal was a federalist proposal. We submitted a draft federal constitution. The Southern Cameroon National Council did that, and which was rejected outright by the chairperson of our committee, the Professor Joseph Owona, and subsequently by the entire constitutional reform process, which is the reason why, once they refused to accept our draft federal constitution, the three of us, Barrister Kontang Elad, doctor then, he's professor now, but he was Dr. Carlson Anyangwe at the time, and myself, we decided to boycott the rest of the drama that was going on at the time.
The reason I ask you these last two questions, sir, and follow up, is do you understand why some people are angry with you? Some even call you a traitor. I mean, if you had worked them up to understand that they are being marginalized, and then they say, okay, we are complaining and nobody is listening to us, we're going to have to finish this in the battlefield. Why would you back down from supporting them in a battle?
No, I mean,
when you have sensitized them to the point that they feel so aggrieved, so angry.
Yeah, okay. I mean, in terms of being angry with me and calling me names and all of that, which is, I mean, they're entitled to do that, but that doesn't change the fundamentals as far as I'm concerned. Leadership also, dear Divine, leadership also means having the courage to tell those whom you are leading that if you go the way they're trying to push you, you'll be going down a blind alley. You understand? So I have had my experiences, including, as I said at some point, my awareness of the devastation of war, okay, and the consequences of war. War is not a game, and you've got, as a leader, you've got to weigh the consequences of the war option with the possibility that you don't even win the independence by war at the end of the day, because there are many examples where people have been fighting their war of independence for 40 years and they haven't got there. So I am entitled as a leader to weigh the consequences of a war of independence that could be protracted on the same population that I say I want to serve, and opening the possibility with an international community that is more aware now about our problem than they were in 1993, 1994, opening that possibility of making a case for something that is defensible, namely that we say we were there was a breach of the agreement to stay a federation. That case can be made, especially to an international community which today is more aware of the problem and more sympathetic to that possible outcome than they were in 1993, 1994.
Dr.
So
Muzu,
you have to balance these things, and you don't just say, "Oh well, we are going to start shooting around." If that was the problem, or if that was the solution, then why are we complaining? We see how I would say barely, because there are places where this kind of thing drags on for 25, 30, 40 years. And we are still only in year 5. But look at the amount of devastation in year 5. Do you think that I would sit down without thinking very hard about what the consequences could be? I just say, well, go ahead and pick up arms. I've got to think about the possible consequences of such an option. And that will have to be a last option.
I would say you're talking now as a diplomat. I mean, diplomats usually want negotiated settlements and so on. You were at the United Nations for a very long time. If I am not mistaken, one of the positions you held was Deputy Secretary General. Am I right, sir?
No, not Deputy Secretary General. I rose to the rank of Assistant Secretary General.
Assistant Secretary General. Mm-hmm. Do you get to that rank without the proposition of your home government?
Well, yeah, I should have.
Where I'm getting. I
should have known that question would come, but indeed, I'm glad you brought it up because.
So I want to ask this for many people to get your answer on record.
Exactly.
Do you become Assistant Secretary General at the United Nations without the support of your home government?
Absolutely. For the 100th time, let me answer. Absolutely, you can. And we may be few Southern Cameroonians, Anglophone Cameroonians, and perhaps even we may be few Cameroonians, in short, to have risen to that rank in the system, but I'm not the only one. Okay, I'm not the only one, and I would ask you, pick up your phone after this program and call, for example, Mr. Sami Kumbo, whom you should know. Now, Sami retired not so long ago from UN service, where he also had the rank of Assistant Secretary General in the Department of Political Affairs, as it was called then. Now call him, call Sami and ask him whether it was the Cameroon government that proposed him for that position.
Do you know why I asked that question, sir?
I read recently, by the way, in one of the millions of write-ups that they issued there to denigrate Simon Munzu, because one of the most effective arms that separatists have invented for this quote-unquote war of independence is to denigrate Simon Munzu, as if that would win the war for them. But one of the write-ups that I saw recently was, Simon Munzu was a representative of the United Nations they even said Zimbabwe, of the United Nations Development Program. He represented UNDP in Zimbabwe. You cannot get to a position like that without the approval of your government. For heaven's sake, we have many Cameroonians who are representing United Nations Development Program or other agencies of the UN around the world. I would give you names. Call Mr. Sam Dominic, who is in Congo today, is in Kinshasa, as the country director of the UNDP. Call him and find out from him whether it was Cameroon government that put him in that position. So
the point I'm asking, sir, you owe no allegiance. You owed no allegiance whatsoever to Mr. Biya Oyijo.
Absolutely none. And I have said it over and over again, steering not only the Cameroonian people but President Biya and everybody else in the regime in the eye to say, let anyone come forward and say that Simon Munzu, from the moment that I resigned my teaching position in the University of Yaoundé because of the Anglophone problem and my very active involvement in the SCNC from the ranks of the CPDM. Now let anyone come forward and say that between September of 1994, I think 4 or 5, I think it was, that I tendered a letter of resignation, and that letter of resignation, which I tendered at the time, is in. I saw a copy of it in Cameroon Post recently. Cameroon Post. Now let anybody from the government, from the opposition, from the separatists, from anywhere, anybody come forward and say, Simon Munzu, this is what you ever received from the Biya regime. I don't ask them anything, not because I could not. I can tell you that I have friends in the regime. I have people in there. So if what I wanted was to go and get my own share of the cake, that wouldn't be so difficult. I didn't commit anything that they would say, oh, you cannot come back to us. I was in the CPDM before.
Now the phone line,
I act on principle. I act on principle and on conscience. That doesn't change with the season. No.